All right. We're talking launch week 8. It's a wrap, and we're here for the wrap party. With me is Nathan Wallace, CEO and founder of Turbot.
Hey, Dave.
And Cody's a lead architect and developer for many features across both the Pipelings, Guardrails, and Pipes.
Yep. Hey, Dave.
So we'll just jump right into it. Monday was a big day. It was Guardrails Day. There was 2 announcement posts, really 4 kind of key things that we delivered during that time period. The first one was related to our new account permission levels. These really give the application team more precise and read-only access to the resources without having to give those application teams full administrative controls if you don't want to. And we also added dynamic notification routing based on those account level permissions or based on resource tags and rules. For Nathan, I guess my main question is, we're offering basically 2 types of notification routing in this case, one based on these new account level permissions and one based on resource tags. Can you talk a little bit about the reasons why you might use one over the other?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the main thing you're trying to do with any notification is get it in the right hands, right, as quickly as you can. And really what it comes down to is whose hands do you want to get it in. Now, often we think you should have lots of different accounts or subscriptions or projects to break up your enterprise and your work. And so account, sort of what we call in Turbot account level routing, is like kind of perfect for that. Any alerts or notifications, this account should go to these people, or specific people, or distribution lists, whatever you want with the new setup with the account CC field. But sometimes, you've got an account which, is used by a lot of developers, or it's got like, okay, whoops, we ended up with one account with a lot of people in it for prod or something like that. And you want to get the alerts to the actual literal owner of the resource, or the person that's actually using that resource. And so that's what the resource tagging ones allow you to do. You can basically set a tag on the resource and say, hey, any alerts, from Guardrails for this resource, send them to this person. So for me, the difference is really comes down to what's the scope of how many people you want on those alerts. And often it might be on an account basis, but for those times when you've got to hit the resource, that's what the tagging ones are for. Those
accounts where you've got 4 or 5 different application teams all kind of using the same account, resource level tags are great. But when you're kind of following best practices and scoping your account level to a single application, generally you can get away with using the account level thing.
Exactly.
Great. Also on Monday, we introduced 2 new significant enhancements to our ServiceNow integration. One was for doing syncs of custom tables in ServiceNow to Guardrails. The second one was adding record filtering for existing synchronization jobs that we already had in place. What challenges or user feedback in those spaces led to the development of custom table discovery feature, and how does it address those?
Yeah, no, we're working with very large enterprises with their ServiceNow setups who want to get more accurate information, out of the cloud into ServiceNow, but also when they're using Guardrails, they want more context that's more accurate for what they're trying to do. And it's just a lot of data. The second thing big enterprises love to do is they love to customize their ServiceNow setup. So, the number of companies we've worked with who turns out customize all the tables, even the most standard ones, right? Create variations of them, X underscore, bloody blah, or whatever it is. So we really need the ability to synchronize in any data they want. And so the custom tables does that. It's really cool. Brings in any of those data from the different tables you want to target. Does it in real time as well, which is quite amazing. So you can work with any data you want quickly. And the other one, of course, is they have a lot of stuff. Like we were talking to one customer there, what they have, oh my goodness, it was ridiculous. It was like 700,000 applications defined in ServiceNow, right? Way more than they had employees, but that's just where they'd ended up, right? And so even being able to filter on things like they had a custom field for whether it was active or not active or stuff like that, being able to filter down the data to what you care about just radically reduces the amount of information you've got floating around, and also, costs, etc. So, limit the information you want, bring in any custom tables you need, and that means that you're really ready for what people do in the real world with ServiceNow, which is, generally fairly insane.
Every time we dig into one of these areas and we look at it, we always have these expectations of how much data people will have, and then you get it at an actual customer and it ends up being 10x that. So I can't wait to get this in the hands of some of the current customers that are using the ServiceNow integration and see how it helps them pull their data in and start using it for their compliance controls.
Definitely.
For Tuesday, we also had another couple announcements there. It was Pipes Day. We introduced a brand new improved query experience in Pipes. with a lot of focus on integrated examples in that and save queries so that you can more quickly get to the SQL that you want to get the information that you need. Secondarily, we added a GitLab integration to allow people to pull in custom mods from GitLab repos. Cody, why don't I start with you? Can you talk about a little bit about what was the biggest challenge when developing the new query UI and pipes, or enhancing the existing query UI and pipes?
Yeah, sure. So surprisingly, what we found was the most difficult part of all that and getting it in and making the queries available was actually for the queries that we ended up feeding in and showing in pipes. Those were all queries that we actually had from our existing plugin documentation for all the different tables and across all of our mods, the Tailpipe mods for each of those plugins and their tables as well. So we had a wealth of queries that we could already tap into that people were already using today and were visible across the various hubs or looking in the plugin or mod docs as well. But now when we finally took all those queries and consolidated them and wanted them in a single view where people could view them, run them, modify them, all through the pipes UI, the hardest part really was just making sure they were all consistent, the titles looked good, they were under the right categories or services, right folders, everything overall, just creating a really consistent story across the queries. And for some plugins like AWS, where we have an upward of 10 plus mods, that was often reviewing tens or hundreds of queries or whatever the number is, just a really large set that we've just built over the years. And it has been really valuable to us as people tapped into those, especially in the mod context, to be able to install those mods and run those queries. And now bringing those into pipes, we have to do another fairly hard look and review at those queries just to make sure that when we brought them all together and smashed them together, that it was a really nice, easy, consistent experience to run those queries for your connections and for the tables within pipes.
That's great. I always love it, in the community Slack when someone asks a question and then I go out to the hub and find a query that exists there and copy and paste it into the Slack message. It's like, oh, that's exactly what I was looking for. It's going to be great for all of our pipes customers to be able to have those handy at their fingertips, be able to just kind of, pick them off of a menu and drop them in. I think that will add a lot of value for them.
Yeah, those so much from our enterprise users that, they've set up this environment and they want others in their team to access, run queries and stuff like that now. And it's intimidating when you looked at, we had hundreds of, you might have hundreds and hundreds of connections there. We've managed to simplify that down in the UI and you had all of and you just got a blank slate of what to run. Now, those questions are right there and you get your answers so much faster. So I'm so excited about it. Sorry, Cody, I cut you off in my excitement.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to note too for all the queries that, people can just pick up and run, like you mentioned. We've also moved them in to the Tailpipe hub as well. So previously for all the queries that were based in the mods, you had to go to the Tailpipe hub, which was, a separate site. And that's people were typically go for mods. But now when you're looking at a plugin and its tables on the Tailpipe hub, now there's a new queries tab there as well, where you can tap into all the example queries that were available before, just at the plugin level or within that Tailpipe hub. But now it pulls in all the related mod queries as well into a single pane. So the same way you can view all those queries in the Pipes UI, you can also do that directly all on the Tailpipe hub as well for each plugin.
Yeah. That's great, because I'm one of those people with the muscle memory of always going to Tailpipe or hub.tailpipe.io first and then going, oh yeah, this is a PowerPipe now. So that'll be a huge quality of life improvement for me. The second thing we introduced on the GitLab integration, we had previously a GitHub integration that allowed you to pull in custom mods from that way. This launch week, we added the ability to do that from GitLab as well.
Right.
Nathan, are there any security considerations or best practices that teams should follow when they're pulling in custom mods from these external repos?
Look, the main thing is getting your creds right. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing, and that connectivity across, because what we're trying to do is set up creds in a way where we have access to your environment to be able to see when it changes and pull that stuff straight into pipes. That's the magic of the experience. Edit here, push, and it comes straight over, to us. GitLab, of course, works differently for something like GitHub, or everybody's different on how they do these things. So the primary things are first, choose the right scope for your token, whether it's, generally probably a project one, so you can, do it for a specific project, or if you've got a set of projects, a group one. You can use personal as well, but you're probably better off on the project group one, where you can manage those permissions properly. Give us what we need, and then we'll start pulling in the data to be able to run that, and you can have the magic of customizing your mods, and away you go. Enterprise tier, we also let you do IP address restrictions and stuff like that for more levels of security. Of course, one of the other ones we've found with our larger enterprise customers is they might not have public access to the GitLab at all. So they're purely inside the wall and all that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, this feature won't work for them because we can't reach it. But we do also support now the ability to upload a zip file of your mod or whatever it is. So for those people who just really can't give us any access whatsoever because that's the way they roll, no problem. You can now do custom mods by just uploading your mod directly as a zip. So that's great.
Yeah, that's a great quality of life feature. I know some customers that are getting great use out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Wednesday was a big Tailpipe day, and there was 3 major announcements on the Tailpipe side. First one was the ability to collect and query data from custom logs. The second announcement was really around collecting data from structured logs, specifically from Nginx and Apache. And then finally, the ability to query your AWS cost and usage data. 3 major announcements, new scope. For the web access log component, Cody, can you talk a little bit about, it's such a broad scope of things that you can look at in web access logs, everything from, kind of usage metrics to security considerations. How did you and the team decide what checks to include in our mods for Nginx and Apache?
A little bit challenging. Like I said, it's a very wide scope, and Apache and Nginx have been around a while, so it's not necessarily new technology. People have been using it for a while. Out there's docs or recommendations or blogs, etc. Those types of things out there for people talking about it. So overall, when we dove in, our first step was just to look at it and see what do people look for typically. What are, like you said, is it around usage metrics? Is it around security considerations? Is it around vulnerabilities? Is it around just sometimes info level type stuff? Just taking a look out there and trying to see generally what do companies recommend looking for, or for tools built around investigating and analyzing your logs. What are they looking for? One thing that we decided to focus on and really zoom into a lot was we're around some of the more security/vulnerability based checks out there. Even within that scope, it was still pretty hard because there's a lot of different ways that someone could come in and try to exploit your access logs, and there's different evasion techniques. So there's a whole host of things within that. It makes it really hard ultimately to pin down what should you be checking for, and what specific patterns do you look for, and how do you know false positives versus real results. So all to say is that there was a lot of research and a lot of testing and just kind of looking at samples of access logs out there to kind of see. So we struggled a little bit, honestly, to find concrete sources of protections or rules that we could really rely on, and ultimately turn into SQL queries, like you had mentioned, that would ultimately be part of the Nginx and Apache access log detection mods. So there are a good amount of sources out there. Ultimately, what we found as a really good source, and a lot of our detections are based off of those, was OWASP's core security rules. And within that, they have a large set of rules across multiple different types of exploits and vulnerabilities that you can look for within your access logs. And within those, they have different paranoia levels. So you can kind of go from paranoia level 1 to 4. And they also have really, really helpful regex patterns and other rule metadata in there that we can then take, analyze, and ultimately turn into SQL queries that the detections could run off of. So there were other sources that we had kind of used and just looked at out there to kind of see what are people checking for, but in particular, that core rule set, we found really helpful in terms of figuring out what to check for and also how to check for it as well when we turn those into detections.
Web access logs themselves are plain text, and many of the other logs that we're looking at are not. They might be nested JSON or JSON-L format, etc. Nathan, can you talk a little bit how we approach the problem of collecting and querying logs that are in JSON format?
Yeah, I mean, structured logging is really what you want to do these days. It's all the rage for your applications. So that's what we've done for years and what others do. So, and we tried to add really good support for that, where a lot of the core sort of plugin and the core capabilities of the tool are able to pull in JSON-L files, extract them, deal with rows. And setting up a custom table now is as easy as just point it at the JSON-L files, and it will just read them in, work out the columns from it. If you want it to auto map to all the columns, it'll just do that, and each top level field in the JSON-L is turned into a column, and away we go. So it makes it super easy. Then you might want to start having more control over it. I only want these columns. I want them in this shape. I need to refont them this way. So what we do there is we actually lean a lot into the DuckDB syntax for that and the functions and stuff that are available. So you can use various DuckDB functions or other concepts to be able to map out the columns when you do the custom table definition, which just gives you a lot of flexibility for pulling that in. So it's really easy to start. You want to be specific, you can be specific, and it stands on the same syntax we use for all the other querying and all the other things, which is DuckDB. DuckDB. Under the hood, it's also really smart. A lot of good work done by the team there. But basically, we try again to lean into that same text. So use DuckDB actually to read the JSON-L file, to do the transforms, to then convert it in or during a collection process into Parquet, which then optimizes it for the storage and all that sort of stuff we do. And then ultimately we use DuckDB to query it from Parquet as well. So this sort of sits in those same principles we're often looking for, which is like, how do we reuse the same core tech? How do we reuse the same language there instead of inventing something new, right? Instead of inventing another new, YAML language to do transforms and all that, don't just use the DuckDB way of doing the transforms. Very natural, very ergonomic, and very efficient when we end up using DuckDB to actually do the work as well. So yeah, that's sort of how we thought about it. And now structured logs are completely accessible from whatever source you want to pull them from in Tailpipe.
A lot of customers will be interested in. Kind of the headline from this day is really the cost analysis tools. It's something that every single customer struggles with in terms of both managing costs, analyzing costs, etc. I'm assuming that as we were building this out and we were testing against our own cost data internally, do you have any interesting things that you found when you were looking at our costs and our cloud usage?
The first interesting thing that I had learned when we were kind of looking at our own cost and usage data was that we weren't actually exporting a lot of our own cost and usage reports. So across our different billing accounts and organizations, we actually didn't even have these set up through data exports yet. So first step was really to enable that and just start having those reports flow through every day, just so we could start to track our cost and usage across the various AWS accounts that we have and use from dev to staging to real production things. So as we had those enabled and then we had those exporting out into S3, second big thing I learned was just how big those reports can get, just looking at, in particular, based on the granularity, and if you choose to include resources and do line items are included within those reports, they can get really large even within a single account, just based on just usage patterns and what AWS reports. So looking at those reports and trying to figure out just from the CSV itself of what am I using and how much does it cost me is really difficult. That's where pulling in that data into Tailpipe and then being able to query that data up front and then building dashboards around that data, that was really helpful. And from within that type of analysis that we had done, one, we had found a fair amount of resources that were still running for several months that were costing us, like hundreds of dollars or more. So that was a little, oops, really helpful to find that, just unexpected resources still running or test resources left over as part of that, which we then quickly terminated and reduced in scope just to keep those costs down and just get rid of waste that way. And the other interesting thing, as we started to develop the dashboards, what we had found that in May and June, we actually started to see some data, which initially we thought were errors. How could there be charges for May and June if we're in April at this point? Where is this billing data coming from? Did we collect it incorrectly? Did I pull the wrong data? And from there, what we had found was AWS for about 53 domain renewals, they'll include that as part of your billing data to show you what the renewal costs coming up are. I'm not sure exactly how far out, but there's future data in the billing reports as well, not just your past or current usage as well. So overall, I think something that I never would have figured out, honestly, until I started mapping out the data, pulling it to Tailpipe, getting it visualized with the help of PowerPipe as well. And then just really being able to interrogate my data that way and have it queryable through SQL was such a huge help compared to me trying to analyze the data on my own, or even to some extent doing it through AWS's console, which has some good tools around exploring your costs, but not to this degree, I'd say.
I was actually working with an enterprise customer, recently discovered they had 10,000 unattached EBS volumes running across their workspaces. So cost and usage is something that I think every organization, no matter what your size, it's always an opportunity there to explore the data and find something that you can kind of optimize in that space. So looking forward to getting this in the hands of customers and seeing what they do with it.
What I really enjoyed about this one is it changes your thinking about what Tailpipe's good for. So logs would go, what logs that happen, audit logs, all that sort of stuff. But in this case, it's like, really Tailpipe's amazing for any time series data, and billing is a time series data element. So pulling that in just sort of opened our eyes to, oh, we could do billing, or maybe we could do message history, or we could do all sorts of things. So I'm really curious to see where people can take Tailpipe by building their own plugins, or we can as we build more plugins.
That segues perfectly into Thursday announcements, which were all about MCPs and our ability to now talk to Steampipe and Tailpipe and PowerPipe, using these advanced AI tools. Can we talk a little bit about, we have these 3 different MCP servers that we released, one for Steampipe, one for Tailpipe, one for PowerPipe. When looking at these, what's kind of similar across them? What's unique? How would you see kind of these being used?
Yeah, I mean, MCP servers have just taken off in recent times, and we played with a couple of the early ones, like a Postgres one or whatever, to talk to Steampipe, or a DuckDB one, which I remember first getting hacked in, working with Cody at one point. We quickly saw the potential for it. So the fun thing about building them is that it's a Wild West. Like, the rules are completely unclear. The spec is out there, but it's not really implemented by most of the clients. Like, you're really trying to work out what the hell is actually useful with these things. And what we came up with was saying, we decided to use Node, could use Python, but a lot of the early examples were in Node. That made sense. It was easy for distribution and use, and it's just a nice little wrapper. So they're all written in Node, trying to get consistent formatting and errors and logging and style out of it so that they talk nicely with the MCP client in this case, to handle the error flows and stuff like that. So starting to get a lot of consistency around that. The shape of what should be the structure of one, what tools should it have, what resources should it offer, if any. We have a status resource, for example, what's the version of different things. So trying to get the right patterns and shapes that made sense for our tooling, consistent naming, we're always obsessed over that, but we tried to get some of that right as well. And then getting the size of the data was really important. Like, you want it to be able to discover the things it wants to use. What table should I use? So you need to return lists of tables, but if you return too much data, you kill your context window or stuff like that, right? So giving it enough information that it could explore further with, okay, table list then heads into a table show, which then heads into a query. So it could learn about the tables, then learn about the columns, and then learn, actually explore the data. So that was where a lot of the commonalities came on as we sort of moved through the layers of making it work.
As you were developing that, I know it was a big iterative process where you're writing the code for the MCP server and then testing it to see if it's working, etc. As you were going through those iterations, what was your favorite thing that popped up during your testing of that?
It's constant joy and surprises, to be honest, when we work with the LLMs in this context. Like, I remember getting the billing data hooked up and just asking questions. I was joking around, what NAT gateways do I have? Which is a classic Corey Quinn question. Oh, whoops. We did have some, right? And we didn't know because they don't pop up in our Cost Explorer enough for us to know. So we run a lot of development accounts, hundreds and hundreds of accounts. We have a fairly complex and messy environment, as many people do, but developing the tools we do, it gets particularly messy. And I'm like, oh, wow, look at that, right? And start digging into those, or I think that was even the first time we found some of the APNC or other things. It's like, what the hell is going on there? And just surprising what it would do. Oh, it'll just build me a graph to show me costs over time, and it'll say, oh, there's a spike here, and then I could start to ask questions like, well, compare how my costs changed over this month, and it would tell me how they changed, and then start to understand why. Doing the same thing with CloudTrail data, it's like, oh yeah, what's being created in this account, whether it's IAM stuff or whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, look, here's some IAM thing that happened. I'm like, wait, why did that happen? And you could start digging in the details of it, and it would give you a full-on timeline analysis of why, and start to look at the motivations for the person doing it. And it was very, very accurate. And I've reached the point now where I feel like every time I chat with my infrastructure, or chat with my bill, or chat with my logs using these MCPs, I discover something new, right? One of the big points we had for the cost stuff was actually, where am I spending money? And that's the question. It's like, oh, EC2 servers, it checks RDS, it looks this. I didn't tell it what to look for. It just starts looking around. And it's like, yeah, you've got a couple of big RDS instances. I'm like, wait, what? Why do we have those? And then I couldn't believe it at first and thought they must have been stopped, but they weren't. And we tracked it down because someone was on vacation or whatever. And so they hadn't stopped them before they left. It was just one of those things. So constant joy and surprise in using the tool to just really explore the data. But the other thing I think it's really fun is once you start building with it. So the PowerPipe one is quite a different experience. That one you live in Cursor or something like that, and you're like, hey, you pull up an existing mod, like one of the detections mod. I was playing the AWS compliant detections mod, for example. I'm like, hey, what new detection should I write? for EC2 instance, like, oh, well, how about when, so let me look at what you've already got. And then it's like, well, how about we do one for EC2 instances when the role changes? I'm like, it's a good idea, right? Can you write that? And it's like, sure. So it goes off and it writes it. And then it starts testing it. A, it came up with the idea, B, it's able to write the code, then I can review it, etc. So just amazing watching it go through that sort of flow. So anyway, I talked a fair bit there, but it was just constant surprise and joy in building those tools out.
Yeah, I think the core idea there of doing broad questions just to understand and to get confidence, and then drilling into specific things that you want to take a look at. And Cody, I know you used a lot of these doing actual development work for Turbot. Like, do you have any tips or tricks for leveraging these MCP servers to actually do real work and to build code?
Yeah, I felt a lot of similar things. I was a bit more using a lot of the MCP servers to help build new plugins, new docs, new Powerpipe mods, using those servers as part of my development experience. For me and for the team, what we found a lot of times was often there's like a certain degree of sometimes it's better to be a bit more general or be sometimes less specific with the prompts and kind of see what the MCP server / agent will come up with as part of that. So Nathan, you had mentioned kind of building out new detections and new Powerpipe mods or parts of mods. And a lot of what we had done and what we found helpful was sometimes just opening it up a little bit in terms of new dashboards or new types of reports or new detections or benchmarks, sometimes just opening it up a bit and still giving instructions, but being a bit more vague or just kind of seeing what it comes up with is really helpful to see what it's just able to do. And, still need to come in and review and maybe reshape it a little bit. But a lot of it's just initially coming in and seeing, well, what is the MCP / the agent capable of? And then as you start to learn from there what directions it likes or what shapes it kind of leans toward a bit more naturally, then we found helpful to start just adding in additional context, pointing to certain files or giving a list of standards or rules that we wanted to follow. And then that just overall is a refinement process of just having it kind of iterate on its own work with help from us of additional context, additional whether it's rules like cursor rules or something like that, additional bullet points of different standards or do this but don't do this. Here's an example of that. Something that we're still thinking about of how to make this easier and what are some prompts that people can use and what are some rules and what type of context should people be including as they're building out new plugins or new mods. This is something we're actively thinking about and working on. But so far, I think the biggest thing we've learned is that it's really iterative process, but a lot of it you can kind of trust the MCP server in a way to kind of see how well, that's the agent / how well it can come up with stuff and how well it can create something very close to what you're looking for. And then it's just adding additional context or guidance for it. And it's really good at then taking that and iterating on it multiple times to ultimately come up with a finished product that you're happy with.
I think that's great insight. I also think that there's times when you do want to be more directive. A lot of times, like the LLMs will take a completely different approach to solving a problem than you will think of, which can help you find things that you might not have thought of in the first place. But there's also times when you want to direct it a little bit more. An example I'm thinking of is using the SQL-based tools to find something for you. It will do queries against different resources and bring those into its prompt context and then try and answer from the prompt context, which might make it a little bit more susceptible to hallucination than if you int it to do a join query across a couple tables. And then the result set is coming from the query, and then it's better able to summarize that in a way where it's less prone to being limited by the context window that it has available to it.
That's one of the really cool things when you use the Powerpipe one, because it will build the dashboard and put the queries into the dashboard, and then the queries run outside the context of the LLM. Getting the queries running in the LLM is also really awesome. Don't get me wrong, a thoroughly enjoyable, amazing experience, but you eat your context window quickly if you've got large results coming into that. Using it to build the things that then do that. And with Powerpipe auto refreshing, it's really fun because it's writing the code over here, you're going over here, and it's coding and changing in front of your eyes while the agent's writing the code. But yeah, keep moving that data out the context window is really helpful in that scenario. It's exploratory, it's fun, and it's amazing what it will find and do for you. And when you can really get it talking to itself, where it's off trying to solve a problem and then running it and, oh, I didn't get it yet, let me try again. Oops, got the column wrong, let me fix it again. And you just see how fast it will start querying all the different things. Like your steam pipe usage is going to, like, in terms of the number of queries you run in a given few minutes, is like now insane, right? Or with Tailpipe, I'm not worried about what the 100 columns are for the cost table. It's worried about that because it can solve that problem for me.
I think one thing has definitely been true over the last couple of weeks for me in particular is that with these MCP servers and the agents, I don't want to write SQL queries by hand anymore, and I found that I haven't needed to. So for instance, I was working on the Apache access log detections mod, leading up to this launch week, and we ended up, I think, with a fairly good set of detections and a query for each of those. And the takeaway for me is I actually didn't handwrite any of those queries. Those were all created with the help of the Tailpipe MCP server and the agent, in terms of what those queries should be doing and what shape they should take. That, like you said, Dave, I needed to kind of feed in and be a bit direct at times, but the actual writing of the queries, from the keywords to the columns to aliases, all that, I mean, all of that was just, I didn't have to handwrite that. So that's a really great feeling of not having to get in and handwrite each query that way. But it's a bit more oversight and directing the LLM to kind of create what I'm looking for and also test it as part of it. So it's just you get into a really nice cycle, I think, that way.
Because the LLM's able to explore the data, introspect the data, because it's in the structured format, right? The SQL is important because it can talk to it really, really well and explore it in a really robust fashion. And you can be the jazz player on top of it. It knows the rules of music, and you're like, oh, try this, and how about that? And it's there, able to do that and find all of that without needing you. When that data is too loose and JSON or other things, it gets so much more confused so much more quickly than it does when it's just able to smash it with SQL query and then say that column's wrong. I got to do this. I need to sample this. I'll do that. It's amazing.
It's the beauty of SQL being as old as it is and being an English language query tool that just has so many examples out there. It's brilliant. That was great. I mean, Thursday was like amazing. It's going to be incredible over the next 3 to 6 months, and just see where the space goes. And hopefully our tools play a big role for people who are experimenting there and trying new things with these tools. And as always, Friday, we had our B-sides post. This week's or this launch week's B-sides is huge. So I encourage you to go out to the actual blog post and read through if you're interested in any particular area. I'm just going to hit a couple of the highlights overall. First one I'll hit is one that's a personal passion project for me in terms of managing multi-query calc policies in the UI. So we now have native support in the UI for building and testing multi-query calc policies. If you know, you know. It's a huge improvement for people who build those. People who don't build them probably won't care that much. The other thing that I think is a huge improvement is on the Guardrails Hub, we now have started to publish the underlying cloud service permissions that you'll need to run individual controls in your cloud service environment. So now you can take a least privilege approach to the permissions that you scope around your cross-account roles for Guardrails, making sure that just the permissions that you need to run the controls that you're interested in are provided on your cross-account role. For PowerPipe, we have some new detections mods, GitHub audit log detections and flow log detections. Especially take a look at some of the screenshots from the flow log detections. There's some amazing work there looking at how you can actually see visual graphs of flow log data within the PowerPipe UI. You can also look for communication with known bad IPs and join that IP information against other plugins that also have IP data with them. So amazing new work there. Also a new PCI DSS benchmark for those that store data in the payment card industry. Finally, I want to just have a little bit of a focus on the community content. We had a large number of contributions from various members of the community, everything from new tables added to the plugins to documentation updates. Every time a community member opens an issue, contributes code to us, or even asks a question in our Slack community, that adds value to every member of the community, really helps elevate that. If you haven't already joined, there are links in the notes of the video here, as well as on all of our websites to how to join the Turbot Slack community. And we'd love you to become a member and contribute to building these tools that we love so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate everyone listening in to this week's Launch Week wrap up. And thank you, Nathan. Thank you, Cody. Look forward to seeing what we do with Launch Week 9 in a few months.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.